Welcome to the Secret Resume podcast, hosted by me, Melody Moore. In this podcast, we explore the people, places and experiences that have shaped my guests, those which have influenced who they are as people and where they are in their work life today, or as I like to call it, their secret resume. Before we dive in, I want to tell you about something that I'm really excited about, which is our Being Free membership. We're developing an online community which is designed for people who are interested in personal growth. If you're navigating career transitions, maybe feeling stuck or burnt out, or simply seeking more meaning in your life, then this is for you. Membership gives you access to a range of resources, a supportive community, and monthly group coaching calls. It will allow you to explore what freedom means to you on your own terms. Head to www.liberareconsulting.co.uk/being-free to join the waitlist. So my guest today is Lisa Smith from Ginger Bakers. So Lisa, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me onto your podcast. I feel quite honoured in that. Yeah, I'm Lisa and I have a business called Ginger Bakers. We're based in the Lake District. So we're just outside Kendal. It's where we've always been based. We have actually moved locations a couple of times, but in the same town or just outside. We are a majority wholesale cake manufacturer. And our customers are a broad brush of delis, cafes, farmers, farm shops, and that kind of thing. We do also supply to larger establishments, some chains, but they're sort of they're small chains, not huge supermarket chains, nothing like that, because we make a very handmade product and we couldn't supply large chains, but we supply some bigger stores as well, so retail as well as hospitality industry. And then also we have our own retail side of the business, which is our own website, which we sell through, and we do food events and food markets and farmers markets and things like that.
And I have to say, I am an enormous fan of your cakes.
Oh, thank you.
Best thing ever. I think my favourite is it pistachio and rose? Is that right?
Oh yes, yeah, pistachio.
Yeah. Love that
lemon,
one. Yeah, lemon,
pistachio and rose.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Best thing ever.
Yeah.
Question actually, do you just supply locally in the Lake District, or do you have national clients?
We supply nationally and internationally when requested to do so. So we're a bigger business than just supplying locally. I mean, we're still classed as a small business, but with 10 members of staff. But we need to supply nationally for that sort of scale. You know, making cakes is a really competitive market. You know, I can reel off quite a number who are our closest competitors. And for that reason, we try and make our cakes different to them, quite different. And also the way we do business and the way we talk about our story. You know, I think that's really important. And that doesn't only attract our local customers. I mean, that's great because we do use a lot of local ingredients, perhaps twists on local recipes, but also that does attract our more national customers as well. That I think it's really important to hold on to that story and give the business personality that people can understand and buy into.
Now, speaking of local recipes and ingredients, you have what is it? Is it a pepper cake?
Yeah, that's right. We have a Westmoreland pepper cake, which is actually the favourite cake of mine that we make. So that a few years ago, in fact, it was 10 years ago now, we were approached by the slow food movement, of which we are members of that movement. And their ethos is all about slow food as opposed to fast food. And they approached us because they have a program called Forgotten Foods. And that program gives foods or recipes or ingredients a sort of level of status, or they try and promote that particular thing and hope that it won't be forgotten. They deem it of enough importance, either national or regional, local importance, that they want to make sure that that product is not forgotten. And it's an interesting story, because they approached me because we are members. They knew of the business and they knew of our approach to our production approach. They asked me if I would consider remaking or introducing back to the market a biscuit. Now that biscuit was a well-known Lancashire biscuit, well, less well-known. They wanted to make sure it was well-known, called the Goosner biscuit. It's a shortbread with caraway in it. Now, we're not in Lancashire, we're in Cumbria, very much in Cumbria. So I didn't think that was appropriate really at all, that we would start to promote and give our backing to a Lancashire biscuit. Not that I wanted any cross-border competition, or I didn't, nothing against Lancashire, but Cumbria itself has an amazing wealth of food history and really good quality products, ingredients, and recipes. So at that time, I'd heard of a pepper cake. It's got a couple of names, either Westmoreland pepper cake or Kendal pepper cake. And Kendal is in the region of Westmoreland. This part of Cumbria was known as Westmoreland. And so I'd seen it in old cookbooks. And so I did some research, found out that not many people have remembered it really. And I thought that was worthy of remembering, because that recipe originated when spices came into the west coast of Cumbria and were exchanged for wool. And at that time, we had a lot of recipes that were developed from those ingredients that came into the west coast of Cumbria. So we have things like, well, the pepper cake, which contains cloves and ginger as well. We have Cumberland rum nicky, which has fruit in it, has rum in it, has a dark sugar in it, which came from that into our port there. We have Grasmere gingerbread.
Love it.
So there's lots of
Cumberland
things.
Sausage is quite spicy as well. Is that
That's
why?
Absolutely. I mean, there are other reasons why those spices were put into the meat as well, but those ingredients were available. And of course, before all the transportation networks developed, and we very much made what was on our doorstep, using the ingredients on our doorstep. That's where these kind of recipes developed. And so that's why I went to that recipe. We tried it out. We had to do a bit of tweaking of it to make it more palatable for the modern palate, not in changing the ingredients at all. The ingredients are exactly the same, but the ratios of ingredients. We needed a bit more of a commercial product that we could sell on, because we're a commercial bakery. So we just tweaked some of the ingredients, making it a bit more moist, less dry, less crumbly, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of got a scary name, I think, pepper cake, but actually it's delicious.
It's absolutely delicious.
Not what you'd think if you just thought, I'm going to be eating pepper.
No, it's absolutely delicious. Great with cheese, which is a very northern thing. In fact, that concept, cheese and fruit cake, because it's a fruit cake, originated in Yorkshire, I think, really. But we were really fortunate last year that Nadia Hussain, in her series, she had a series called Simple Spices, and she scoured the country for small producers that were using certain spices that she was fond of, and one of them was black pepper. And we were really lucky that I was able to do that on her show. And the hope is that this recipe will not be forgotten, and that it will be part of our local food culture and history, because it's in the food industry, it's fantastic coming up with great new concepts, new flavor combinations. That's great, but also behind that, there's a lot of history, and that's really worth looking at and remembering. And there's always history to all the food that we eat.
Yeah, I saw that episode of Nadia's show, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Lisa!" It was really funny.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that we were able to do that.
Yeah,
and give prominence to this very local cake. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, let's Thank you for that. That was really interesting. And I am obsessed with cake. So I could literally talk about cake all day. But let's take a leap into your story and some of the people and places that have influenced you and what you do for a living. But let's start with your paternal grandmother. Do you want to tell us a bit about her?
Absolutely. So yeah, there's always people behind everyone's story, and even if you can't recall it, I think everybody would be able to recall moments from their life that have been really influential. And my paternal grandmother, she had a huge effect on me growing up and remains having that impact now. So her name was Ella Smith, and she died at the age of 92, which I thought was quite an achievement.
Mm-hmm.
And later in her life, she did quite a lot of traveling, solo traveling. She had family in South Africa was one place, and I was always quite in awe of that, because back then when I was, I was probably early teens at that time, and I just thought that was amazing that she'd go off to these places by herself in her later years. But that's not really what was the only thing that impressed me. She was just tenacious. She'd be really interested in me and what I thought about, what I wanted to do with my life. She just showed a real connection and interest, and that stayed with me. And I think one of the most, it's really simple, but it's really stayed with me. When I went off to university and I came home, every time I went back, she sent me off with a parcel of this particular cake. And so I get emotional about it.
Aww.
But yeah, I ended up recreating that cake and called it Ella's Treat. But it was probably what is known as a paradise slice traditionally now. But so it was fruited in coconut and chocolate. But every time I came home, she'd send me back with a parcel of that. And so I started. Sorry,
You're making me emotional.
So when I started my business, that was a real must that I included that in our product range. So I recreated that. And since then, it's developed as products and ingredients develop and ideas change. I have now, it wasn't a conscious decision, but looking back, it has real significance. I have turned that product, I've slightly tweaked it, and now called it Chocolate Nancy after my daughter. So there's a really strong link and thread through what I do, and it's probably only looking back. I probably didn't realize it at the time, but it makes me realize how significant particular women in my life have been. So yeah, we have a product called Chocolate Nancy, and actually that is in a few recipe books. Just to add a little snippet, not to take away from my amazing grandmother, who was an entrepreneur herself. She had her own business, several of her own businesses. She was a milliner, and then she sold and made women's underwear. But so quite a woman of very tenacious, very forward thinking for her age. But anyway, bringing that back to the Chocolate Nancy, that I was asked to contribute a recipe to a cookbook that was really weird timing, but very significant. So Maggie's the cancer charity were doing a cookbook, and I was asked, which I was again very honoured, because there's lots of celebrities in that book that have contributed really significant recipes in their life. So I thought, well, this is a great one. I'll submit this. But at the time, I'd just been diagnosed with cancer myself. So they didn't know that at the time, but all worked out and felt really important to do. So that recipe that originated with my grandmother now has continued to thrive and have life. And it's got a name. There isn't a Chocolate Nancy that exists other than our Chocolate Nancy. So that's really nice as well, that we've been able to create a new concept of a recipe, and hopefully that will go forward.
You've just made me think of loads of questions I've just been writing down there. So one is, what's the book called? The Maggie's Cancer charity
Recipes
book?
to Remember.
Okay, brilliant.
So it's all about recipes that have some history or significance in people's lives. And it's sweet, savoury, all sorts of things. I think even cocktails are in there.
Well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes because people always like to go and look for things. You mentioned that your grandmother was entrepreneurial. Does it run in the family, being entrepreneurial?
Hugely, hugely. That's a really big influence on me. And I think that's why I started my own business. I haven't got business training. I was an art therapist by training. And prior to that, I'd studied design and worked in the design industry for a short while. But almost every member of my family who have gone before me, not necessarily my siblings, but had their own business, small businesses, small local businesses. But my dad, my mum, my uncle, my aunt, my grandmother. So I was surrounded by people running their own businesses. And I think that enabled me to think that it was achievable for myself. I didn't set out thinking, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, I'm going to run my own business. But I think it evolved quite naturally.
And you also mentioned that you had cancer, and I don't know if you mind talking about that, but I can't imagine what that would be like to have your own business whilst undergoing cancer treatment. Do you mind talking a bit about
I don't mind at all. No. And I'm 5 years clear now, which is fantastic. So yeah, throughout the life of this business, which is now nearly 19 years old, there have been loads of ups and downs. And I think everybody will have that in their story. And you learn to ride them. But, my cancer diagnosis, which was breast cancer, which end to end was about 12 months of treatment, that came off the back of us being quite severely flooded, both the business and my home. And that was more traumatic than the cancer. That the cancer just felt like another little add-on to that story, really. So at Cumbria, we have lots of flooding, and that's becoming common across the whole of the UK. But back in 2015, when it happened, it wasn't as bad as it is now. But we flooded. We had a storm, and the whole region was quite badly flooded. I live quite near to a major river in Kendal. And it came up pretty waist deep in the house and in the business premises, which was not at home at that point. It had started at home, but I was in a premises, again, very close to the river. And that was pretty traumatic. Following the flooding of our home, we spent 2 years moving from place to place before we could get back into our house. It took a long time to repair the damage and get back in.
2 years is a hugely long time.
It was. And yeah. And looking back, that was more traumatic than the cancer. I think because I'd been through that, taking on another challenge of ill health. Actually, I wasn't particularly ill. The treatment made me ill, but I wasn't ill. That just, it didn't seem particularly difficult to manage. As far as the business goes, I had a really good team around me. At that point of that diagnosis, I think maybe there was 5 members of staff. And between them, they could get on with the day-to-day business, day-to-day manufacture of the cakes. I was still there as much as I could be. In fact, I was, even if I just had treatment feeling really sick, I'd still be able to just log on and have a look what was going on. So, we were able to continue. Okay, it all continued. Well, we were moving forward still at that time.
And how did you cope with then the flooding? You said that was very traumatic. So basically your premises where you're making your product, you can't use them anymore.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Yeah. I mean, we were very fortunate, really. So that happened early December 2015, and we had had lots of Christmas products ready to be sold. So we lost all of that stock. Those premises were not usable. Even with a clear up, they were not, we couldn't return to them. Certainly not return to them within a decent time frame. We were told it was going to be at least 6 months. So then I had a bit of a dilemma. What do I do now? Do I, it was a pretty small business. I could just pack it up and move on to something else. But I had members of staff who really relied on that wage. And I think something that was particularly significant was one of the members of staff, his wife had just had their second baby, was on maternity leave. So his job was really important to them. So I thought, I can't, I've got to keep going for the sake of these people around me. And I had a phone call, I think it maybe the day after or a couple of days after we were flooded, from another local baker who had capacity in his bakery. He had space and time to allow us to go in there and use his facility. So that was a fantastic offering of help and support. And so we did that. We went and used, we worked at night when their ovens weren't in use at that point. And we were flooded on the Saturday evening. By the Friday, we were delivering again to our customers. And I think that's where my sort of either bloody mindedness or just an unable to give up, unable to kind of kicked in, because I thought, cake businesses are, if we weren't going to supply our existing customers, somebody else would, and we potentially could have lost those customers. So I wasn't going to let that happen. So, everybody was incredibly supportive, incredibly sympathetic, and, allowed us to continue in the best way that we could at that time. So we were in that bakery for 3 weeks, and then a little space became available of our own, which we were able to equip through grants and insurance payouts. So we had a little space of our own on the site that original bakery was, not our original, the one that helped us out. And then from that, we had a purpose-built bakery built for us. The landlord of that site reached out and said, was something he could do. And I very cheekily said, well, actually, if you
build me a bakery,
build us a bakery. And so, and then our current bakery premises was built.
Amazing. So let's take I guess it's a leap. It's probably not too much of a leap because we're talking about your grandmother, but you said after your degree, you went and lived and worked in Hong Kong.
Yeah. So I'd already done a couple of years in Switzerland, as I was actually doing a couple of ski seasons, and having quite a lot of fun.
Nice.
And to go to Hong Kong and to go and teach at a technical college there, which was I was able to teach design because that was my degree was in. And alongside that, I taught English as a foreign language to some very young students. I worked for a language school, and I was teaching children as young as 3 years of age.
Wow.
So culturally, it's quite different to the UK. There's a lot of pressure in society and families to achieve the best you possibly could. And, I was given really young kids, and I significantly remember one young girl at the age of 3. There was, I was trying to teach her English, but there was just no way she was wanting to sit down and learn. And it was totally inappropriate. And it really struck me that this kind of pressure was just too much, too young. And that particular girl had what I identified as a slight learning disability as well. So there's just no way she was going to learn traditionally. And that was not acceptable for Chinese families, that time. And that had a big impact on me. And so I got my design training I was very fortunate to do a bit of design work for a company in Hong Kong as well. And I just saw this. It was a bit of a light bulb moment. I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't, that was back in the late 80s, early 90s. Lots of consumerism. It was all, especially in that culture, all about the car you drove, the watch you wore. And it just really struck me that I didn't want to keep going and working in that industry. So I came back to the UK. I'd been out there for a couple of years, so it was sort of time to move on. Came back to the UK and decided to retrain as an art psychotherapist, because that seemed to bring together those two worlds, being able to work with people, but also use a bit of creativity from my design training. So I did that. I trained in London, a couple of years training for that, and then went to work in a specialist centre. So up in Cheshire, I moved back to Cheshire, where I'm originally from, and worked with young people with learning disability and helped them communicate through art. So I did that for quite a number of years.
How, just out of interest, how come you ended up in Hong Kong?
Yeah, past boyfriend at the time, his dad had moved out there. So we sort of went on the back of that, and it was an opportunity to go there. I know it was kind of a bizarre place to choose. And from that, I was able to travel around Asia quite a bit. But yeah, it was an opportunity. So I took it.
Amazing. Yeah. And you talked about the consumerism, that very sort of conspicuous consumerism.
Yeah.
Did you feel that, was it different in Hong Kong to the UK? I mean, I think we're a similar age. I was, doing my own thing at that point as well. And the sort of 80s and 90s were very much that kind of Thatcherite, everybody for themselves kind of time.
Yeah. I think it was just really acute in Hong Kong. I hadn't, and it was just at the time of my life where, I was beginning to be able to start to make choices and form really strong opinions. And I think it was just a moment in time for me, and being in a particular place where it felt really acute. And that just made me think, I can't do this. Yeah. And that's, and you mentioned the consumerism, because when I came, so obviously my life did change, and I'm now got a cake business. So that's quite different. And that happened when I moved to Cumbria. And when I first started this cake business, I don't make affordable, they're affordable cakes for a certain sector of the population, but not everybody can afford to buy our cakes. They're not really, really high end, but they use good quality, quite costly ingredients, because good quality ingredients can cost more. So that was a huge dilemma. What do I do when I am charging for a single cake what somebody would buy, a whole meal for their family for, possibly? So that was, I had to really kind of think about that quite a lot. And it was quite an issue. But then, what I did, I suppose what I settled on, that I was making a really good quality product, supporting other local businesses that, a certain part of the population could afford. And I kind of settled on that because I was making a product that was good quality and didn't have bad ingredients in, that satisfied that part of that dilemma for me.
No, I could see how that could be a dilemma. And tell me about art psychotherapy. So I get the art bit, but what made you want to combine that with the psychotherapy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd seen people in need in Hong Kong, need of more care, more thought about how they were being educated, not just pressure cooker type education, and a bit of needing recognizing that some people needed a different approach to help them communicate. I also trained as a teacher, a special educational teacher as well. So for me, it was all about being able to enable people to communicate and express themselves in a way that was more tailored to them and not just part of the mainstream. Just identifying people and, giving people an opportunity to communicate and learn. So the psychotherapy, okay, it can be used in various areas, whether it's learning disability, mental health, or everyday life even. But I chose learning disability particularly, I think, because of that experience I had in Hong Kong. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? That was that one child that really took you down that route.
Yeah, absolutely. One child. And she may have grown up going into mainstream school, succeeding, but there was just something not right about the pressure that was being put on her at that time to learn, when that was not the approach that was helping her or enabling her in any way.
Lovely. We'll come back to how you ended up becoming a baker, but let's talk about your third person, or rather your second person, your third thing you're going to talk about, which is your mum, Mary. Do you want to tell us about her and what influence she's had?
Yeah, I think I mentioned that she did have her own business. So I grew up in her shop, really. Her shop was at the front of our house. It was a children's clothes shop, but it could have been anything. I don't know why it was a children's clothes shop. I never had the opportunity to really ask her that. She had grew up in, she had trained in the catering industry. So that I've got a link to the food industry there. But she was a really sociable, vivacious woman who, in my eyes, could do anything, absolutely anything. She was liked by a lot of people. She had a lot of friends, a lot of, and I suppose that really became apparent when she had passed away, unfortunately, at the age of 62, at her funeral. The amount of people that turned out for that was just, I was just in awe, really, of how well liked and supported she was. I mean, her business was a small business. It was a single shop in a small town, but that wasn't significant. The size of the business didn't matter. It was just that she was a really capable woman. And, I have memories of when I was at home growing up. We had several freezers. It was a freezer generation then. People froze everything. Freezers had become really popular. We had 2 huge freezers at home, and they were chock-a-block prepared for any party. So when she made something, she bulk made. She was a really talented cook. And so the freezer would be full of, I'm really going to show my age, but very much 1970s fare, Charlotte Russe. I don't know if you remember Charlotte Russe.
You're going to say vol au vents.
Yes. Or she could not have been vol au vents. But, oh God, we were in the household of the fondue, or everything we did, the very 1970s. But, at 10 minutes notice, she could, if a horde of people came through the door, she'd welcome them in and be able to put on a huge spread. So, she was just very sociable and very capable woman. So, yeah, of huge importance and significance to me.
It sounds like you had quite a number. I asked earlier about if you had entrepreneurs in your family, but quite a lot of strong entrepreneurial women in your family.
Yes, absolutely. All those women that have a real significance on me and who I am. Yeah, and I kind of want to take that forward, and I suppose part of me naming one of my cakes after my daughter is part of that, me wanting to leave that legacy. I have, may I add, also got a cake named after my son, so I've not left him out. In fact, his cake came first because he is the eldest.
Do they like the cakes that are named after them?
I think they're a little bit embarrassed, but to be honest, I think they would kind of shrug it off a little bit. But yeah, they're both like cake, so yeah.
So tell me then, how did you become a baker? You were a art psychotherapist. You worked with people with learning disabilities. How come cakes came on the horizon.
Yeah, so I moved to Cumbria. So I'd met my husband at that time in Cheshire. We both worked in the same place with the Centre for People with Learning Disability, and his hometown was Kendal, and an opportunity. I think I probably have sought out opportunities and and jumped at them really, and an opportunity to move here. I mean, it's an amazing Lake District. It's absolutely beautiful. I love the outdoors. I love, I was and try to still be quite sporty and do quite a lot of exercise. So, the opportunity to move here came about. But there wasn't a lot of art therapy work. I gave up my job down in Cheshire, and I managed to get some sessional work here, but it wasn't a huge amount, and there wasn't a lot coming up on the horizon. So I thought, oh, why not I'll make something, going back to my making days and my more creative days, I'll make something to sell. And the easiest thing for me to do was to make cakes. I thought that was a product that I could sell. The farmers market scene was really gathering a bit of momentum. People were getting more interested in handmade and locally produced produce. And so we had a really good, thriving farmers market here in Kendal. So I took a stall there and started to sell cakes that I'd made in my home kitchen. And really there was no plan. There was no, okay, I'm going to have a business now. I'm going to write a business plan. That's not how my business has evolved. It's always been organic. And it just grew and grew from there. And I was fortunate at that time that some other local businesses to us looked at what I was doing, liked what I was doing, and asked my business to supply them. So that's where the wholesale side developed from. I was selling directly to the local customers, but my wholesale market began to develop at that point. So there it was. And there was never been any big plan. I think probably the first time that I really had to really think, oh God, I'm doing this now. This is serious. And I had to kind of get my adult head on. Was after we'd been flooded and I took on a really long lease at the new building that we had built. That was when it all became quite real. So, and that was quite a few years in. So I had to really think about it a little bit differently then, because we had a huge overheads. So it was a bit more serious then.
So you kind of almost stumbled into it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It could have been anything. It could have, whilst I was in Hong Kong, when I was working for a design company, then that was a jewelry company, like a costume jewelry company. It could have been something like that. But I must have had a sense that food was the way to go, especially with farmers markets and that opportunity to sell. So I must have sensed that wouldn't be a good way to go.
And what is it, do you think, that's kind of kept you? Did you say 19 years it's been?
Yeah.
Now, what's kept you going? What's kept you interested? What is it, do you think, about you that's meant
bloody mindedness? If I'm absolutely honest, honestly, it really is, because and just not wanting to fail, which is, it's a bit sad, really. But I can't give up. I can't. I've had opportunities or occasions when I could have said, enough is enough. This is hard now. We were flooded. Then I got cancer. Then my daughter was really, really unwell for a couple of years and in hospital for 2 years. I could have said, okay, I can't do all of this. And quite rightly so. They would have been absolutely genuine reasons and very understandable, but not for me. That, I don't know when would be enough for me to say, okay, now is the time to stop doing this. I mean, I'm not at that, I'm not there. There's always another corner. There's always another mountain to climb and something to achieve. And yeah, I mean, it is, having your own business is a roller coaster. there are so many ups, so many downs. But I think you've got to be built of quite stern stuff to keep going. And maybe that's what, those women in my life have taught me. And, that's what keeps me going. I have to say, I'm not, I know this is very much a business podcast, but I'm not a classic businesswoman. I just have determination to keep going. And if things are, I mean, particularly now, we've had this economically, the climate has been really difficult, and we're not through it. It's still very, very difficult. But there'll be another way of looking at that, another angle, another way of overcoming that. And I think that's what keeps it a little bit fresh. And, I don't know whether this is particular to entrepreneurs or people who have their own businesses, but you've always got to keep looking for the next thing. How can you keep going? How can you support your staff? There's so many different elements to keep looking at when you've got a business, and there's so many. You've got staff, all of those things in running a business. But I think that's what drives me. That there's always something to achieve.
How you mentioned there about the next thing, what, always looking at what's the next thing. How do you keep abreast of what is coming, and what do you do to kind of make sure you're ahead of the game, or surfing that wave, or whatever cliche you want to use? This is just one thing. I really love popular culture. I really love knowing what's going on, and hearing, listening, seeing, whether it's music, art, whatever, reading, films. I'm interested in why things are done, what's going on next. And that probably plays into the business as well. I just have that curiosity, and that, paired up with my inability to fail or to feel like I'm a failure, it's quite a driving force, I think. So, and also actually feeding into that is, food manufacture, cake making is a really common thing. During lockdown, so many people started cake businesses from their home kitchen. So if I'm going to stay ahead of the game, I've got to look at what other people are not doing and make sure I am doing it to stay ahead of the curve. I've got people to employ, I've got wages to pay, I've got reputation, as well, which is a bit sad, but I don't want to let anyone down. So so that keeps the engine ticking over, moving forward. What would you say is current or upcoming, do you think, in not necessarily just the cake world, but the sort of food, beverage world? What trends are you noticing at the moment?
Yeah, I could just drill down into that quite specifically, but as a whole, I think we've all got to be conscious of what we put in our food. And sugar is huge. It has been for a few years. Sugar, fats, our diet. And that, it's tricky when you've got a cake business, when you're asking people to indulge and you're asking people to, eat things with perhaps ingredients that are not particularly good for them. So that is, we've got to be mindful. We've always got to keep that in our minds, that the way we, that affects the way we market our products. It's not an everyday product, but it is, it does fit in quite nicely to our target audience, our target market, that they will not eat. We're not expecting people to eat our cakes every day of the week, but we've got to keep an eye on our ingredients and what we're putting into our products. So that's really key, and that will be going ahead. I can't see that ever changing, nor should it. But I think as far as just more specifically thinking about flavour combinations and things like that, we try and use sweeten a bit sweet and savoury together, like adding salt, which I know has been a very popular thing. Adding some herbs into some of our recipes, things like that. Just keep. We're a company that really likes to innovate. That can cause a bit of a conundrum, because some of our customers, some of our wholesale customers find it more difficult to take on our new ideas that we're trying to promote to them. But this year particularly, we've gone down the route of having smaller batches of more frivolous ingredients added to our cakes. So, for example, our current smaller batch for October, we've done it seasonally, so we're talking in October at the moment, is a chocolate and chestnut and smoked sea salt cake, which is amazing. So we spend a lot of time developing those flavours and getting them to work together. But we've learned now that if we make things more smaller batches and for shorter periods of time, we have a certain uptake on those products, but not everybody will want to take on products like that.
Do you have some clients that are more adventurous than others?
Absolutely, we do. Some will just take anything that we make, whatever. They'll say, yeah, we'll have whatever your next small batch bake is going to be. We'll have however many of those. We do. And then we have others who might just take a couple of items, but more of the traditional style, like a plain chocolate brownie, because that's their clientele. So, we've got to think it's not just about what we want to do. We've got to think of several people in this chain. It's the people directly buying from us, and then it's their customers as well.
Let's talk about the final thing that's on your list, which is your children. You've mentioned them a couple of times already, but tell me about how they're influencing you.
Yeah. I suppose the biggest thing, I mean, I have a 26-year-old and a 17-year-old. The biggest thing, I think, for me, and it may sound a bit morbid, I'm not sure, but through all the highs and lows of business, it can be really difficult to navigate. It can be quite overwhelming, and can be quite depressing, and it can be quite having a big impact on your mental health and your motivation and your ability to get up in the morning. I'm not saying that I lie in bed not able to get up, but there can be some really black clouds over my head sometimes when there's huge bills to pay, when there's the staff work, all of those things are part of being a business, and having children keeps me going, because whenever I am feeling really overwhelmed with everything that can be going on, I just remember them and I just think, okay, I can't, I've got to keep going. I've got to navigate a way through. I've got to make this work. It's okay, because they are there. They are dependent on me. I am their role model. I can do it. So it's in that way that they are really influential. Without them, having had so many ups and downs, I don't know where I'd be, because they are stability. They're your responsibility. You've got to be there for them, because, as a parent, you want them to be well-rounded. You want them to have successful lives. I don't mean success monetary, but just emotionally successful, emotionally stable. So that helps me. Yeah.
You just said the word success there. What does success mean to you?
Success, I suppose, and I'm probably not, if I thought about it, it sounds a bit vain, but people seeing that what you do is a good thing, that you're there, that you're kind, you're honest, and being kind to people, and people knowing that you are kind, that's success. So Ginger Bakers, the business, it's not about the bottom line. It never has been. I mean, we have to make money. I've got bills to pay, wages to pay. And oh God, I mean, I'm not denying how nice it would be to have a huge bank balance, but that, that's not what I'm in it for. It's about doing a good job, making sure the people that are in the business have a good work-life balance, that they have a happy work life. We have some volunteers that work at the business, and when we were able to move into the much larger premises that were built after we were flooded, I had space and capacity to take on some people with additional needs, which really I haven't noted that as one of the most significant moments, but it probably was as well, that I was able to, at long last, it felt like, use some of my training with people with learning disability, or so we've got a couple of people right now who work with us each week, and they come and they get experience of a real working environment. We are able to support them, but more importantly than that is what they give us. So we all have to work alongside these young people, and it makes us slow down, stop. It makes us, we have to, so they might be working alongside a team member, and you've got to communicate with them, you've got to explain, you've got to talk to them, you're not just thinking about the job, you're thinking about other people. And that was just like such a fantastic moment when I could do that. And it'd be nice going forward if I could do more of that kind of thing. And I suppose I find it difficult to believe that all businesses don't do that, because the benefit it brings is enormous to the well-being of the staff team. The kind of the diverse community it brings, it's just really beneficial.
And it sounds really full circle. You're bringing through still that passion you had for the art therapy, the art psychotherapy, and helping people. You're still doing that, even though your business is something quite different.
It made everything fitted into place. When we had this bigger space and we had to take on more staff, the overheads were bigger, so the business had to grow. So we had capacity to do it. And it's like, oh, wow, I can really do this now. So, yeah, it's I know why some businesses don't do it, but it isn't that difficult. And what it brings to your business and to those young people is fantastic.
I'm going to ask you some of my regular questions that I ask my guests. So tell me what's next for you, for Ginger Bakers. What's coming up?
Yeah. So I think I mentioned earlier that we're in difficult economic times, really. I know we have been for quite a number of years, but I think we're now really feeling the knock-on effect. I'm speaking that from my experience with a small business. Minimum wage increases, potential tax increases, ingredients costs because of failing harvests. That's had a huge impact. Chocolate, currently butter's been through it, sugar. They've all begun to have quite big knock-on effects. And I think we're really feeling it quite acutely now. We had a pretty rotten summer in the UK this summer. Quite a lot of our business relies on tourism. So but even if we are not supplying a cafe in a tourist area, people are still going to a cafe, having a piece of cake. When it's sunny and lovely, people do it more. When it's wet and miserable and people are feeling a bit depressed about the weather, people do it less. So all of that has had an impact. And I think now for us, it's about standing strong, going with that, looking at how we can ride that and come out of it successfully. I unfortunately think it's not over. We've got a new government. We've got to see what their budget's going to be at the end of this month. But yeah, I think we're looking at how we can refine what we do, how we can sort of get through that period, really. So that's immediate, just to get us through to 2025. For me personally, what I am trying to do is build up the team so that I can, I wouldn't say step back from the business, but have more opportunity to think about the business from above. And that's what I really like to do. We did speak earlier about looking at trends and changes and culture, but that's a really important thing if you want your business to keep moving forward. But you need time to do that. And I think also to perhaps work with people who are more disadvantaged than we are and get them involved in the business somehow, to work out how we can do that and keep that momentum going as well. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking of for the future.
And what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. And you know, being a woman in my 50s, you know, things start to fit into place and you get more confident and you kind of think, well, you know, this is me now. But, but back then, I think I was really intimidated by people. And I used to, you know, especially moving into an industry, the food industry, that I didn't know a lot about. I think that I probably didn't speak out loud enough. I didn't value my opinion or value how I wanted to do things. And I probably didn't recognize it either because I wasn't confident enough to really think about myself as having a really important opinion and an important contribution. You recognize it later in life and you realize that you can do things and you can make a difference. But back then I probably didn't. And so I would just really encourage younger people to own their opinions and form opinions, really, because I think I didn't allow myself to form opinions because I was so intimidated by people in business telling me what I should do, telling me what my bottom line should be, telling me that what's your profit and loss, what's your 5-year projection, all of that. And I just panicked and think, I can't, you know. But actually now, you know, I've been doing it nearly 19 years and that's not what is the main driving force behind the business. And that's okay. But I didn't know it then.
Do you know what it sounds like to me? And this might sound a bit sappy, but it feels like your business is much more about heart and soul than about profit and loss and, you know, projections and all of that.
I think it is, but it's very difficult to own that, isn't it? When you're not sure of your opinion because you've got people telling you it should be different. So yeah, I think you can speak up and you can own your own opinion. It's okay. So yeah, that's what I would be telling my younger self.
What about books? Any books you would recommend, or your thought on books?
That was just feeds into what I was saying a bit there about owning your opinion, and you don't have to read all those books that people tell you should read. So going into business, have you read such and such about increasing your profits, about doing this, about doing that? Oh, I can recommend this to you. I have, you know, I've read things. I've read across all genres, but that doesn't matter. Just read things that excite you, that ignite a passion. It could be a Mills and Boon. It could be the latest Jilly Cooper, whatever. It absolutely does not matter. If that gives you, ignites a passion, an interest, a desire, that's fine. That's exactly how it should be.
Yeah, I agree. I think I see people talking about, you know, you need to focus and really just, you know, don't do these other things and don't distract yourself. And I'm like, no, do distract yourself and read all sorts of different things because that's how brilliant ideas come together is through lots of different seemingly unrelated things coming together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But if you don't finish a book, so what? I mean, I always think I've got a pile of half-read books, but you know, it doesn't. What does that matter? You know, you can dip in, dip out, and you know what's right for you at the time, and that's okay.
Yes,
it's always okay to give up on something if it's not right for you at that time.
Yeah, I wrote a book, and at the beginning of my book, it says you don't need to read all of this book. And that's because I don't finish books. And it says just pick up and find the bits that will be useful to you because I rarely read a full book, I've got to be honest. What about a title for your story?
It would have to be something along the lines of not giving up. Something like that. I think that runs through certainly my business life. Yeah, that I'm not giving up yet. Throw whatever at me and I'll find a way through it. It might be different, but that's okay. But to me, that won't be giving up. That's just change and being able to adapt. So yeah, it'd be something along those lines.
Lovely. And my final question is, if somebody wants to buy some of your delicious cakes, how do they find out where they can get them from?
Oh, so the easiest way is just Googling ginger bakers and hopefully we'll come up, we'll rank ginger bakers cakes or website, but you'd find us. Excuse me. So you can buy direct from us from our website. We also do supply a lot of cafes around and about, but sometimes you wouldn't necessarily know it was our cakes.
Yes.
That's okay. You know, cafes don't have to tell their customers who's made them.
Mm.
So the easiest way is directly on our website.
Brilliant. Fabulous. Well, I just want to say that was so interesting. It's made me hungry talking to you, but I've really, really loved our conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely to chat to Lisa. I know her through association rather than knowing her directly, and it was so nice to be able to connect with her and just thoroughly enjoyed hearing her story and understanding the journey that she's been on and exploring what it means to be a woman in business, to run a bakery, and understand some of those challenges. And there was a few things that really stood out for me during the conversation. One was the significance of the several women in her family. You know, she comes from a very entrepreneurial family, but the significance of certain women in her family and the impact that's had on her. And one that really stuck in my mind was her grandmother, and the fact that she felt that her grandmother really listened to her and understood her and tried to understand her. And I've had a similar experience with one of my relatives, which was actually my godmother, who was the same age as my grandmother. And the power of having somebody who's really interested in you and in your life and what you think and feel whilst you're growing up is really powerful and makes you feel seen, which I think is incredibly important as you grow. The second thing was her resilience, really. And, some of the stories she told about her cancer diagnosis and also the flooding that her business experienced. I have family up where Lisa lives, and I know the time that business flooded, and it was significant for her, and just her ability to bounce back. And I think that resilience, that bloody mindedness, as she calls it, that ability to just get on with it and within a few days be back serving her customers, because she was well aware that if she didn't, then somebody else would. And really linked to that, it's not just about her personal resilience, but also the importance of the community, people around stepping in and offering support, and having an amazing team, particularly when she had her cancer diagnosis, was having a fantastic team who could really work quite independently of her. And I think too many of us as leaders in both in large and small businesses are not good at really delegating to our teams and really helping them be competent. I'm a great believer that you should make yourself dispensable in an organization. If you're a leader, that you build your team to such an extent that they can run without you, and you're just there. And we talk about this more towards the end, about Lisa trying to step back and really take that more strategic look at her business and look at the trends and make some decisions about where her business is going. But I also liked her cheekiness as well, that, the fact that when the landlord, where they were, looking, said, how can I help? And she asked them to build her a new bakery. There's that kind of, you don't ask, you don't get perspective coming through. The third thing was, and this really reflected from the conversation in the previous episode with John Parkin, about being confident in what you have to offer. she is aware that their offer is not the cheapest, and there's lots of good reasons for that because of the quality that they put into their cakes, the quality ingredients. But she's very confident with that, and she's very honest and open about that, and an awareness that these are a treat. They're not for every day. And she touches on some of the challenges around people's attitudes towards sugar, rightly so, and health. But yeah, I really loved her clarity about what it was they had to offer, and the confidence to not have that race to the bottom from a price perspective. The fourth thing I was really interested in, and these days I think there's a lot of, the hustle culture around, set yourself big goals, and it's all about targets, and create a business plan. And her business grew organically. And I think this has been true for quite a few of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, that they kind of fell into things. She started baking, she went to farmers markets, and then people were interested in more of a wholesale side of her business. So, she then evolved that. And I thought there was just something really interesting about how her business has evolved, and it's an organic way of building a business rather than a big rush to have a £1 million business or a 6-figure business or a 7-figure business. It's about building a business that works for her and responding and reacting to the what her customers were asking her for. And the final thing, which I really loved, was the bringing together of different parts of her life. She'd been a psychotherapist. She's worked with people with learning disabilities, and actually having a business that's large enough and the flexibility to bring in people with learning disabilities into her business, giving them an opportunity to get some work experience, but also recognizing the amazing benefits that brings to her and her team and to her customers as well. I really love that kind of full circle moment, really, of how she's been able to bring together different aspects of her life. Next week, my guest is Jenny Clark. Now, Jenny is another really interesting entrepreneur, interesting woman. She runs a business called The Wild Times, and it's a nature-focused yoga and adventure retreats business. And we explore all things entrepreneurship, being a digital nomad, what it's like to run retreats, and why that is both fascinating and wonderful and also a challenge. So yeah, tune in next week. I'm really excited for you to hear Jenny's story. This podcast is brought to you by Liberare Consulting. If you enjoyed today's show, why not click on the subscribe button so you are among the first to hear about new episodes? And we would love for you to do us a favour and click on the share button and share this episode with one of your friends.